The kitchen clock showed 2:47 a.m. when Aurora Evans discovered. The end of her rope came in the form of an empty formula can. She stood at the counter, shaking the container with increasing desperation, willing just one more scoop to materialize. The metallic rattle echoed through her tiny kitchen, a hollow sound that matched the feeling in her chest. Behind her, 6-month-old Rose's cries grew more insistent, each wail, driving another spike of panic through Aurora's exhausted mind. "Please," she whispered to the can, as if prayer alone could fill it. "Just one more feeding. That's all I need." But the container remained stubbornly empty, save for a few powder specks, clinging to the bottom, not even enough to dust the inside of a bottle. Aurora set it down with trembling hands and gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white against the worn laminate. "Think, Aurora. Think." She pulled out her phone, the cracked screen coming to life with a swipe. Her banking app opened to reveal the truth she already knew by heart: $3.67. $3.67 between her daughter and hunger. The numbers blurred as tears threatened, but she blinked them back fiercely. Crying wouldn't feed Rose. The baby's cries escalated, shifting from complaint to genuine distress. Aurora could distinguish every note in her daughter's voice, the difference between tired and hungry, uncomfortable and afraid. This was hunger, pure and simple, and it cut through Aurora like a blade. She opened the refrigerator, knowing what she'd find. A 1/4 gallon of milk, but Rose couldn't digest regular milk yet. Half a loaf of bread, a few eggs, some leftover pasta she'd been saving for her own lunch tomorrow. Nothing that would help a 6-month-old baby. The cupboards yielded no miracles either. She'd already checked them twice tonight, as if formula might spontaneously appear between the mismatched dishes and dented cans of vegetables. Her hands shook as she closed the last cabinet door. Rose's cries had taken on a rhythmic quality now. Hungry, hungry, hungry. Each sob an accusation Aurora felt in her bones. What kind of mother couldn't even keep formula in the house? What kind of provider lets things get this desperate? She moved to the living room where Rose lay in her second-hand bouncer, tiny fists waving in the air, face red with frustration. The moment Aurora appeared, the baby's cries intensified, recognizing her. Source of comfort and food. Except tonight, Aurora had no food to give. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," Aurora murmured, lifting Rose into her arms. The familiar weight of her daughter, the sweet baby smell mixed with tears, the way those little fingers immediately grabbed for Aurora's shirt, seeking comfort. It all combined to break something inside her. Standing in her dimly lit living room at 2:47 a.m., holding her hungry child, with $3.67 to her name and no formula in the house, Aurora Evans finally understood what it meant to be completely, utterly desperate. "Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to all my new and returning viewers. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe for more powerful stories that touch the heart." We've all faced desperate moments, but imagine being a single mother with a hungry baby and nowhere to turn. What would you do in Aurora's situation? Would you swallow your pride and ask for help, or try to handle it alone? Comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you'd do in her shoes. Aurora bounced Rose gently, muscle memory taking over even as her mind raced through impossible calculations. 26 years old, and she felt ancient. Every step she took around the small living room carried the weight of choices made and unmade, paths taken and abandoned. "Shh, sweet girl," she whispered against Rose's downy hair. "Mama's going to figure something out. Mama always does. But did she? The evidence suggested otherwise. 6 months ago, she'd believed those same words when she'd held her newborn daughter for the first time, terrified but determined. Back then, she'd had her mother's hand to squeeze, her mother's voice promising everything would work out. "You're stronger than you know, Aurora. We Evans women always are." Except her mother hadn't been strong enough to fight the cancer that took her just 2 weeks after Rose's birth. The timing felt like a cruel joke, given just enough time to meet her granddaughter, to whisper blessings over the baby's head before leaving Aurora truly alone. The medical bills from her mother's final days still sat in a folder on the kitchen table, growing thicker with each passing month. Collection notices mixed with sympathy cards, an absurd combination that somehow perfectly captured Aurora's current existence. Rose's cries softened momentarily, and Aurora took the opportunity to check her phone again. Maybe she'd misread the bank balance. Maybe there was money in savings she'd forgotten about. But the numbers remained unchanged, as final as a verdict. She scrolled through her contacts, thumb hovering over names that might help. Her cousin in Denver, but she'd already borrowed money for the electricity bill last month. Her former co-worker Janet, but Janet had 3 kids of her own. The list of people she hadn't already leaned on grew shorter with each passing week. Then there was the name she never called, the contact she should have deleted months ago, N. Marcus N.B., Rose's father, the man who'd promised her everything under the summer stars, who'd talked about baby names and future plans until the moment the pregnancy test showed positive. Then suddenly, those dreams evaporated like morning mist. And I'm not ready for this, Aurora. I'm only 20 to 8. I've got my whole life ahead of me. As if she'd been ready. As if 26 was the perfect age to be abandoned while pregnant. He'd left town within a week, transferring to his company's Seattle office, blocking her number before he'd even finished packing. The last she'd heard through mutual friends, he was dating someone new. Someone without complications. Someone whose body wasn't changing to accommodate his child. Aurora forced herself to scroll past his name. Even if she could reach him, even if he answered. What would she say? The baby you didn't want is hungry, and I can't afford formula. Her pride might be in tatters, but it wasn't completely dead. She'd managed this long without him. 6 months of doctor's appointments alone, of assembling the crib with YouTube, tutorials, of learning to change diapers at 3 a.m. with no one to take shifts. She'd even gone back to work at the diner when Rose was just 8 weeks old, grateful for Monica's flexibility, but aware that part, time waitressing, barely covered rent, let alone the mountain of everything else. The WIC office had helped with formula initially, but there'd been a paperwork mix, up last week. Something about income verification and missing documents. She'd meant to go back to sort it out, but between work shifts and Rose catching a cold, the days had slipped away. Now it was Sunday night, Monday morning, technically, and the office wouldn't open for hours. And you can't pour from an empty cup, her mother used to say. But what happened when the cup had been empty so long you'd forgotten what fullness felt like? Rose's breathing had shifted to hiccuping sobs, the kind that came after extended crying. Aurora recognized the exhaustion in it. Her daughter was wearing herself out with hunger and frustration. Soon, she'd fall into a fitful sleep, but Aurora knew it wouldn't last. In an hour, maybe 2, Rose would wake again, and the cycle would repeat. I'm going to fix this, Aurora promised, her voice stronger than she felt. I don't know how yet, but I will. You deserve better than this, baby girl. You deserve more than I had. The words hung in the air like a vow, witnessed only by the shadows on the wall and the faint streetlight filtering through threadbare curtains. Somewhere in this sleeping town, there had to be an answer. There had to be help. Aurora just had to be brave enough to find it. With Rose momentarily quieter against her shoulder, Aurora made her way back to the kitchen. She flipped on the light and winced at its harsh glare. The empty formula can stood like an accusation on the counter. Maybe I missed something, she murmured, setting Rose in her bouncer on the kitchen floor. Aurora grabbed the can again and tilted it toward the light. She used her pinky finger to scrape along the inside edges, gathering the finest dust of powder that clung to the metal. It amounted to less than half a teaspoon. Nowhere near enough for a proper bottle. Still, she tapped the precious particles into a clean bottle. Her gaze shifted to the sink, where Rose's bottles from earlier sat waiting to be washed. One still had a thin film of formula residue at the bottom. Without allowing herself to think about what she was doing, Aurora added a splash of warm water to it, swirled vigorously, and poured the diluted remnants into the new bottle. The result was pitiful, barely an ounce of extremely watered-down formula. Aurora bit her lip, calculating the nutrition this would provide. Almost none. She'd read enough parenting books to know that diluting formula was discouraged. Babies needed the full concentration for proper nutrition and development. Just for tonight, she whispered to herself. Just to get through until morning. She added more warm water until the bottle was half full. Even in the dim light, she could see how watery it was, more like slightly cloudy water than actual formula. Rose would recognize the difference immediately. The baby's fussing increased again, tiny hands batting at the air. Aurora lifted her, cradling her close. Here, sweetie. Mama made you something. Her voice caught as she offered the bottle. Rose latched eagerly, her eyes fixing on Aurora's face with complete trust. After a few sucks, the baby's expression changed. She pulled away, face scrunching in confusion, then tried again. The hunger drove her to keep trying, but after a moment, she began to cry harder, pushing the bottle away with flailing hands. I know, Aurora soothed, tears welling in her own eyes. It's not right. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. The rejection of the watered, down formula seemed to crystallize everything. Her failure, her inadequacy, her complete inability to provide the most basic necessity for her child. The weight of it crashed down on Aurora all at once. She sank to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, and pulled Rose tight against her chest. Her own tears fell freely now, mingling with her daughter's. The cold tile beneath her felt appropriate hard, unyielding, much like her circumstances. What are we going to do? She asked the empty kitchen. The walls offered no answers. Rose continued to cry, her little body tense with hunger and exhaustion. Aurora rocked her, humming a broken lullaby through her tears. The clock on the microwave blinked 3:15 a.m., hours until any store would open, hours until she could even think about asking someone for help. Aurora's phone sat on the counter above her. There had to be someone she could reach out to, even at this hour, someone who wouldn't judge her, who might have formula on hand or could loan her enough money to buy some first thing in the morning. Her brother Travis lived 2 hours away. He had a baby of his own, just a few months older than Rose. He might have formula. He would help if he could. He always did when she asked, which was precisely why she hated asking. His family struggled too. Every time she leaned on him, she knew she was taking from his children. But Rose's cries had taken on a hollow quality that Aurora had never heard before. It wasn't just hunger now. It was desolation, confusion as to why her needs weren't being met. Each sob was a tiny indictment. You promised to take care of me. You promised I would never go hungry. Aurora reached up and grabbed her phone. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Not when Rose's well-being hung in the balance. Tonight, she would have to ask for help. Aurora stared at her phone, Rose's cries echoing through the small house. The screen's harsh glow illuminated her tear-stained face as she scrolled through her contacts. Each name represented a choice, and none of them good. Her finger paused over Travis. Brother. She hadn't called him for money in over a month, not since the electricity bill fiasco. Back then, he'd sent what he could without hesitation, but Aurora had heard the strain in his voice. Travis worked 2 jobs to support his wife and their toddler, squeezing by on little more than Aurora herself. Every dollar she asked for was one less for his son's future. It's just formula, she whispered, trying to convince herself. It's for Rose. It's not like I'm buying something frivolous. But the shame burned anyway, hot and familiar in her chest. Aurora had always been the responsible one, even as a child. When their father left when she was 12 and Travis 10, she'd stepped up to help their mother. She'd started babysitting at 13, got her first real job at 15, and had put herself through community college while working full-time. Being needy didn't suit her. Asking for help felt like admitting defeat. Rose's crying intensified, pulling Aurora from her thoughts. The baby's face was flushed, her little fists clenched tight. Aurora bounced her gently, weighing her options. There was Mrs. Garcia next door, a kind elderly woman who sometimes watched Rose when Aurora worked weekend shifts. But Mrs. Garcia lived on a fixed income, and Aurora had already noticed her neighbor cutting back on her own groceries. Just yesterday, Aurora had given the woman her last loaf of bread, claiming she had plenty when in truth she'd gone without dinner herself. Monica, her boss at the diner? She'd already advanced Aurora's paycheck twice this year. The last time, she'd done it with a look of concern that bordered on pity. "Honey, you need to find a more stable situation," she'd said gently. "This isn't sustainable." Aurora had nodded and promised things would get better, knowing they likely wouldn't. The food pantry wouldn't open until Tuesday, and she'd already used her allotment last week. The formula they provided had run out faster than expected when Rose went through a growth spurt, drinking more than usual. Aurora glanced at the clock again. 3:27 a.m. No stores were open, no services available. The WIC office was closed until morning, and even then, her paperwork issues would take days to resolve. Travis remained her only viable option. He would have formula for his son, or at least the means to send money for an emergency purchase. She knew he wouldn't hesitate, and that was precisely what made it so hard to ask. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Rose. "Mama tried to do this alone. I really did." Aurora's finger hovered over Travis's name. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose gutter she couldn't afford to fix. The sound seemed to emphasize the fragility of her situation. One more thing falling apart, one more problem she couldn't solve alone. Rose hiccuped against her shoulder, exhausted from crying, but still restless with hunger. The baby's need finally tipped the scales. Aurora pressed the call button, then immediately hung up. 3:30 in the morning. She couldn't wake Travis's whole household. His wife worked early shifts as a nurse. Their toddler was a light sleeper. A call now would disrupt what little rest they managed to get. A text, then, less intrusive, less desperate sounding. Travis might see it when he woke naturally and respond then. Aurora took a deep breath and opened a new message, her last thread of independence unraveling as she prepared to type. Aurora settled into the corner of her small couch, adjusting Rose against her shoulder. The baby had quieted somewhat, though her breathing still hitched with occasional sobs. Aurora balanced her phone in her free hand, thumb poised over the blank message field. How to begin? What words could possibly convey her desperation without sounding pathetic? Aurora stared at the empty text box, the cursor blinking expectantly. "Hey Travis, hope you're good." Too casual, too false. Of course he'd know immediately that things weren't fine if she was texting at this hour. I hate to ask, but... No, starting with an apology would only amplify the awkwardness. Emergency situation. Too alarming. He'd think someone was injured. Aurora deleted each attempt before completing a single sentence. The words wouldn't come, strangled by pride before they could reach her fingertips. Rose whimpered softly, as if sensing her mother's distress. "It's for her," Aurora reminded herself firmly. "Not for me." She closed her eyes for a moment, summoning courage. When she opened them again, she began typing steadily, letting the raw truth flow. "Travis, I'm sorry to bother you. I ran out of baby formula for Rose, and I don't get paid until next Friday. She's so hungry and I'm struggling. Do you have any formula at home, or could you maybe lend me a little so I can get some? I hate to ask, but I don't know what else to do. Rose is all I care about. Please." Aurora read the message over twice. Every word felt heavy with admission that she couldn't provide for her daughter, that her careful planning had failed, that she needed rescue yet again. The text laid bare her inadequacy in plain, undeniable language. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. Perhaps there was another way. Perhaps if she just held out until morning, she could figure something out. Maybe the church pantry would be open, or perhaps Monica would advance her just enough for a small can of formula. But these were fantasies, and Aurora knew it. The church pantry had been closed for renovations all month. Monica had already stretched the diner's finances thin to help her. And Rose, sweet, innocent Rose, couldn't wait until some vague maybe materialized. Aurora glanced down at her daughter. In sleep, Rose's face had relaxed somewhat, her long eyelashes casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. She wouldn't stay asleep for long without proper feeding. Soon the hunger would wake her again, and the cycle of crying would resume. The thought steeled Aurora's resolve. With a quick breath, she tapped send before she could reconsider. The message whooshed away with a soft sound, carrying with it both Aurora's hope and her shame. The clock on her phone showed 3:42 a.m. Travis wouldn't see it until morning, but at least the request was made. The admission of defeat was official. Aurora leaned her head back against the couch cushion, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The weight of the day, of all the days leading to this moment, pressed down on her shoulders. She'd done what she needed to do. She'd reached out. Now all she could do was wait. Aurora dozed fitfully, Rose sleeping against her chest. The baby's warmth and the rhythmic sound of her breathing had finally lulled Aurora into a light sleep, though worry kept her from sinking deeper. Every few minutes she would stir, check that Rose was comfortable, and glance at her phone. The screen remained stubbornly blank. No reply from Travis. At 4:17 a.m., a soft chime broke the silence. Aurora's eyes flew open, instantly alert. She carefully shifted Rose to reach her phone without disturbing the baby. A reply. Her heart leapt with relief, only to stutter when she saw the message. "Hello. You might have the wrong number. But I saw your message, and I want to help. Do you and the baby have any formula left for tonight?" Aurora blinked, reading the text twice more. Wrong number? She quickly checked the contact information and realized with a sinking feeling that she'd misdialed. Instead of texting Travis at his new number, she'd sent her plea to a complete stranger. Heat rushed to her face as mortification set in. She'd just shared her most private struggle, her failure as a mother, with someone she didn't even know. Someone who now had a direct window into her desperation. "No, no, no," she whispered, careful not to wake Rose. This was worse than asking for help. This was broadcasting her neediness to the void. Aurora's fingers trembled as she typed a hasty reply. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong number. I'm embarrassed. Please ignore this. I didn't mean to bother you." She sent it quickly, hoping to close this humiliating chapter. With any luck, the stranger would delete the conversation and forget it ever happened. The response came almost immediately. "It's really okay. I'm actually in town, not far away. I'd be happy to help you get what you need for your baby. Please, let me help. I know it's sudden, but I can't in good conscience ignore that you're in need." Aurora stared at the message, confusion mingling with disbelief. Who responds to a wrong number by offering help? It seemed too good to be true, and, in Aurora's experience, things that seemed too good to be true invariably were. Before she could formulate a response, another message appeared. "If you're uncomfortable meeting, I can leave some formula on your porch or have it delivered, whatever you prefer. Just tell me what you need." Aurora's heart pounded against her ribs. The stranger seemed sincere, but caution held her back. Was this real kindness, or something else entirely? The grandfather clock in the hall struck 1 in the morning, its deep chimes echoing through the empty corridors of the country estate. Sebastian Davenport looked up from the stack of contracts on his mahogany desk, realizing he'd been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes without comprehending a word. He pushed back from the desk and stood, stretching his tall frame. At 34, he kept himself fit despite the long hours his business demanded. Tonight, however, weariness clung to him like a second skin. He crossed the study to the wall of windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. The estate stretched for acres in every direction, pristine, perfect, and utterly lifeless. Sebastian pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Outside, mist gathered along the rolling lawns, ghostly fingers reaching toward the house. The scene held a certain melancholy beauty that matched his mood. He had purchased this property outside Sage Hollow as a retreat, a place to escape the constant demands of Davenport Industries. Yet in 3 months of ownership, the house had never felt like home. Home required more than expensive furniture and original artwork. It needed voices, laughter, the comforting sounds of people moving about their lives. Sebastian's footsteps echoed too loudly here, reminding him with every step that he walked these rooms alone. He returned to his desk and picked up the half-empty glass of bourbon he'd been nursing all evening. The amber liquid caught the light from his desk lamp, glowing like trapped sunlight. Sebastian took a measured sip, letting the warmth spread through his chest. On his desk sat framed photographs, memories preserved under glass. His parents on their 20th anniversary, his father's arm around his mother's waist, both smiling. His sister at 16, radiant at her school dance. And the most recent, his executive team at the launch of their newest product, Line, a success that had added several billion to the company's valuation. Success. The word tasted hollow on his tongue. What good was building an empire when there was no one to share it with? His colleagues respected him, but maintained a careful distance. His few relationships had fizzled when women discovered his work would always come first. Or worse, when they seemed more interested in his bank account than the man behind it. Sebastian set down his glass with a quiet clink. At the height of his professional achievements, his personal life remained a study in solitude. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could buy practically anything in the world except genuine connection. He glanced at his watch, debating whether to attempt sleep. His bedroom upstairs felt as impersonal as a hotel suite, despite the designer. His assurances that the space reflected his personality perfectly. Sebastian almost laughed at the thought. What did it say about him that his personality could be summed up in neutral colors and clean lines? The soft chime of his phone interrupted his brooding. Sebastian frowned. Few people had this private number, and fewer still would use it at this hour, unless something was wrong. He reached for the device, expecting a business emergency from the Asian markets, or perhaps a text from his insomniac CFO. Instead, an unknown number glowed on the screen, along with the preview, of a message that began with a name he didn't recognize, Travis. Sebastian unlocked his phone, curiosity overriding his usual caution with unknown numbers. The message filled his screen. Travis, I'm sorry to bother you. I ran out of baby formula for Rose, and I don't get paid until next Friday. She's so hungry, and I'm struggling. Do you have any formula at home, or could you maybe lend me a little so I can get some? I hate to ask, but I don't know what else to do. Rose is all I care about. Please. He read it twice, recognizing immediately that the message wasn't meant for him. The sender had mistakenly texted his number, clearly intending to reach someone named Travis. A brother, perhaps, or a friend. Someone they trusted enough to reveal such vulnerability. What struck Sebastian most was the raw desperation bleeding through the carefully composed words. He could almost see the person on the other end, a parent, alone in the night, trying to soothe a hungry child. The image stirred something in him, a memory from his own childhood of empty cupboards and his mother's worried face. Before his company's success, before the mansions and private jets, Sebastian had known hunger. His family had struggled after his father's business failed. He remembered his mother watering down milk to make it last, the burn. Of shame when she had to use food stamps at the grocery store. They had climbed out of poverty through hard work and some lucky breaks, but Sebastian had never forgotten those lean years. The text message brought it all rushing back, the vulnerability, the fear. The quiet dignity in asking for help when pride demanded silence. Sebastian stared at his phone, aware that he should probably ignore the message. It wasn't his problem. The sender would realize their mistake and contact the right person. Yet he couldn't bring himself to set the phone down. Sebastian stood abruptly, decision made. If this person lived in Sage Hollow, as the area code suggested, they weren't far. The town had a 24-hour convenience store just off Main Street. He'd noticed it on his drives through the small community. They would carry baby formula. He didn't question the impulse that drove him to respond, only tapped out a reply. Hello, you might have the wrong number, but I saw your message, and I want to help. Do you and the baby have any formula left for tonight? His finger hovered over the send button for just a moment. Was he overstepping? Would his offer frighten the desperate parent on the other end? Sebastian sent the message anyway. The worst that could happen was rejection. They could simply ignore him or tell him to mind his own business. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair and picked up his car keys from the silver tray on the console table. Outside, The night was cold and clear, stars visible beyond the mist that clung to the ground. As Sebastian slid into his car, his phone chimed with a response. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Sebastian felt something shift inside. Him, purpose replacing the emptiness that had become his constant companion. Tonight, he could make a difference for someone, and somehow, that meant everything. Aurora's message glowed on the screen. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong number. I'm embarrassed. Please ignore this. I didn't mean to bother you." Sebastian read the reply and understood the mortification behind those words. He stood in his foyer, keys in hand, determined not to let this connection slip away. He could almost feel the sender's desire to retreat, to pretend the vulnerable moment had never happened. But retreat meant a hungry baby and a desperate mother with nowhere to turn. He typed quickly, "It's really okay. I'm actually in town, not far away. I'd be happy to help you get what you need for your baby. Please, let me help. I know it's sudden, but I can't in good conscience ignore that you're in need." Sebastian sent the message, then added another before she could respond. "If you're uncomfortable. Meeting. I can leave some formula on your porch or have it delivered, whatever you prefer. Just tell me what you need." He watched the screen, waiting. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. The person on the other end was struggling with how to respond. Sebastian could imagine their conflict, weighing desperate need against the danger of accepting help from a stranger. After what felt like an eternity, a reply appeared. "I don't want to trouble you. This was a mistake. I was trying to reach my brother. I'm sorry." The hesitation was clear, even in text. Sebastian walked to his car, sliding into the driver's seat while crafting his response. He needed to be reassuring without seeming threatening, generous without appearing suspicious. No trouble at all. "I'm awake, and I have a car. I can run to an all-night store and get formula for you. I remember how important it is for babies to eat on schedule. I promise. I just want to help. No strings attached." He started the engine, letting it warm up as he waited. The dashboard clock showed 4:25 a.m. The roads would be empty at this hour, the town still asleep. Deciding to take another approach, Sebastian sent a follow. "Up, I know we're strangers. My name is Sebastian. What's yours?" Offering his name felt like extending a hand across the digital void. It made him real, a person rather than an anonymous texter. The response came after a pause. "Aurora. My name is Aurora, and my baby is Rose." Sebastian felt a jolt at the name. Rose. His mother's name had been Rose. The coincidence struck him as meaningful somehow, like the universe nudging him forward. Aurora, like the dawn. "It's a beautiful name," he replied, then added, "Aurora, you and Rose shouldn't have to wait until morning to eat. I can bring some formula over right now." "I don't mind at all." The next reply took longer. Sebastian waited, engine humming quietly in the driveway of his estate. Finally, "Though, okay. If you're sure it's not too much trouble, I'm at 14 Oak Lane, the little house at the end of the street." "I really can't thank you enough, Sebastian." Relief flooded through him. She'd taken the leap of faith, shared her address, accepted his help. Sebastian put the car in drive, already plotting the quickest route to the convenience store and then to Oak Lane. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Please don't worry," he typed, then added, "I'm glad you sent that text, even if it was by mistake." Aurora's response came quickly this time, "Thank you." "I don't know what else to say." Sebastian could feel the weight lifting from her words, the desperate edge softening into cautious hope. He pulled onto the main road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. "No need to say anything. I'll see you soon," he replied. As he drove toward town, Sebastian reflected on the strange turn his night had taken. An hour ago, he'd been alone in his study, contemplating the emptiness of his success. Now he had purpose, direction, a concrete way to help someone in need. The convenience store appeared ahead, its fluorescent sign one of the few lights in the sleeping town. Sebastian parked and hurried inside, nodding to the sleepy clerk. He found the baby aisle and studied the formula options. Not knowing exactly what Rose needed, he selected 2 large cans of premium infant formula, along with a pack of bottles in case Aurora needed those too. At the register, the clerk raised an eyebrow at the purchases and the late hour, but said nothing. Sebastian paid, declined a bag, and carried the items back to his car. As he drove toward Oak Lane, Sebastian checked his navigation. The address was in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Small houses built in the 1950s, far from his own estate. He wondered about Aurora, about the circumstances that had led to her late night plea for help. He wondered about little Rose, hungry and waiting. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Sebastian felt connected to something real, something that mattered. The sensation was both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Aurora paced her small living room, Rose finally asleep in her arms after crying herself into exhaustion. The text exchange with Sebastian had left her jittery with a mixture of hope and apprehension. What kind of person responds to a wrong number by offering help at 4 in the morning? Either someone extraordinarily kind, or someone with ulterior motives. She glanced out the window for the 5th time in as many minutes. The street remained empty, the neighboring houses dark and quiet. She had given her address to a complete stranger. The thought sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her, yet desperation outweighed fear. Rose needed formula, and this Sebastian person was bringing some. Aurora adjusted the sleeping baby against her shoulder and tried to prepare what she would say when he arrived. Should she invite him in, thank him at the door and quickly close it? How did one navigate accepting charity from a stranger without seeming either ungrateful or too trusting? A pair of headlights turned onto Oak Lane, moving slowly as if searching for a house number. Aurora's heart leaped into her throat. The car was nicer than any she'd seen in this neighborhood, sleek and black, expensive without being flashy. It stopped in front of her house. A tall figure emerged, carrying a shopping bag. He moved with confidence but not aggression, pausing at her gate as if giving her time to assess him from the safety of her window. Even in the dim streetlight, Aurora could see he was well dressed, dark jeans, and what looked like a cashmere sweater under an open coat. His dark hair was neatly kept, his posture straight but not stiff. Taking a deep breath, Aurora moved to the door. With Rose still sleeping against her shoulder, she opened it just as Sebastian reached the porch steps. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. "Sebastian?" Aurora finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, offering a gentle smile. "Yes. Aurora, I presume." His voice matched his appearance, warm, educated, with the slight hint of an accent she couldn't place. Not threatening, but not overly familiar either. He maintained a respectful distance at the bottom of the steps. "Thank you for coming," Aurora said, shifting Rose slightly. "I still can't believe you're here." Sebastian glanced at the sleeping baby, his expression softening. "Is this Rose?" he asked. Aurora nodded. She just fell asleep. She was crying for hours. Sebastian held up the shopping bag. "I got formula. I wasn't sure which kind she needs, so I bought a couple of options. The premium one seemed best." Aurora's eyes widened at the sight of 2 large cans, far more than she had expected. That's too much. I can't accept all that." "Please," Sebastian said, his tone earnest. "It's the least I can do. No child should go hungry." Something in the way he said it, a flicker of old pain perhaps, made Aurora believe him. This wasn't just casual charity, there was conviction behind his words. "You can come in," she found herself saying. "It's cold out, and I'd feel terrible sending you away without even offering you a cup of tea after all this trouble." Sebastian hesitated, then nodded. "If you're comfortable with that." Aurora stepped back, allowing him entry into her small home. She felt a flash of embarrassment at the worn furniture, the patched curtains, the obvious signs of financial struggle. But Sebastian's eyes held no judgment as he entered, only kindness. "I'll make up a bottle right away," Aurora said, leading him to the kitchen. "She'll wake up hungry soon." Sebastian set the formula cans on her counter, along with the package of bottles. "I got these too, just in case." Aurora felt tears prick her eyes at the thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "No need to say anything," Sebastian replied, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Rose. "I'm just glad I could help." Aurora studied him in the kitchen light. Up close, she could see that he was probably in his early 30s, with intelligent eyes and the subtle signs of someone accustomed to responsibility. Though clearly wealthy, there was nothing arrogant in his demeanor. "May I ask why?" Aurora couldn't help questioning. "Why would you help a complete stranger in the middle of the night?" Sebastian considered her question. "Because once, a long time ago, someone helped my family when we needed it, and I never forgot how much that meant." Aurora paced the small living room, one hand nervously smoothing her tangled brown hair, the other cradling a now wide-awake Rose. The baby sensed her mother's anxiety and whimpered softly on Aurora's shoulder. In the past 20 minutes, Aurora had experienced a whirlwind of emotions: shock that Sebastian, a total stranger, was willing to help her at 4 in the morning, fear that this might be too good to be true, relief at the promise of formula on the way, and nervous anticipation at the idea of meeting this kind man who had answered her accidental plea. She had almost convinced herself the text exchange was a dream, but the lights of an approaching car now swept across her front window, cutting through the darkness. Aurora's heart leapt into her throat. "He's here." Stepping to the window, she peeked out and saw a sleek black car park under the old oak tree by her gate. The engine purred quietly before shutting off. In the glow of the street lamp, Aurora glimpsed a tall figure step out, carrying what looked like a grocery bag. For a split second, panic flared, opening her door to a stranger in the middle of the night defied every lesson her mother had taught her about safety. But something told her this was different. His messages had been nothing but respectful and considerate, and he had given his name, Sebastian. Somehow, it felt like she already knew him, just a little. Aurora gently bounced Rose to keep her calm and mustered her courage. She opened the front door just as the stranger ascended the creaky porch steps. For a moment, both of them paused, taking in the sight of one another in the dim porch light. Sebastian had expected to find a tired mother, but he was not prepared for the young woman standing before him. Aurora's face, though drawn with worry and fatigue, was kind and graceful. Loose strands of chestnut hair framed her pale face. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she had an air of gentle strength. Sebastian noticed she held her baby protectively, her body angled as if to shield the little one. Aurora, for her part, found herself momentarily speechless. The man at her doorstep was tall, probably over 6 feet, and even in the low light, he exuded an effortless confidence. He looked around early 30s, with neatly kept dark hair and eyes that reflected genuine concern. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans and a grey sweater under his open coat, yet something about his posture and the subtle quality of his attire hinted at refinement. "Sebastian?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. He offered a small, warm smile. "Yes, Aurora, I presume." She nodded, adjusting Rose in her arms. "Thank you for coming. You really didn't have to. I don't even know what to say." Her voice wavered, the mix of gratitude and embarrassment bringing heat to her cheeks. Sebastian lifted the grocery bag slightly. "It's okay. I'm glad to help." He glanced at the baby, who peered at him with round, curious eyes. "This must be Rose," he said gently. Aurora managed a smile as Rose gurgled at the sound of her name. Yes, she was asleep, but she woke up a few minutes ago. As if on cue, Rose gave a soft, plaintive cry, a reminder of why Sebastian was there in the first place. "Here," Sebastian said, concern flashing across his face. "Let's get her fed." He opened the bag and pulled out 2 large cans of premium infant formula. "I hope I got the right kind. The store didn't have many options at this hour, but these looked good. If it doesn't work, I'll find another store." "It's perfect," Aurora interrupted, relief flooding her voice. She realized she was on the verge of tears again. "Really, it's more than I imagined." "Thank you." She stepped back. "Please, would you like to come in? It's cold out, and I'd feel awful sending you away without at least a warm drink after you went through so much trouble." Sebastian hesitated for a moment, then nodded graciously. "If you're comfortable with that, sure, just for a moment." Aurora led him into the modest living room. The space was tiny and humble, painfully so when she suddenly viewed it through the eyes of an outsider. The threadbare couch, the second-hand coffee table with a missing wheel propped up by a book, the faint smell of baby powder and last night's pasta in the air. She blushed, hoping he wouldn't judge her, but if Sebastian noticed any of it, he gave no indication. His focus remained on Aurora and the fussing infant in her arms. "Make yourself at home," she said apologetically, gesturing to the couch. She quickly cleared a baby blanket and a couple of Rose's toys off the seat. Sebastian took a seat carefully, as if not to intrude, setting the formula cans on the coffee table. Aurora didn't waste another second. She had a clean bottle ready and immediately opened one of the cans. Her hands were shaking with anticipation as she scooped formula and added warm water from the kettle she had kept heated. Rose's whimpers escalated into cries at the smell of milk. "Almost there, baby," Aurora cooed, snapping the bottle lid on and swirling the contents. Sebastian watched quietly from the couch, his heart aching at the scene. Aurora's frantic movements, the baby's cries of hunger. It hit him hard, seeing the reality up close. This wasn't just a text or an abstract situation. This was a mother and child in real need, and only a thin wall separated them from true hardship. A wave of protectiveness and compassion swelled in him. Aurora hurried over to the rocking chair by the window, easing down with Rose in her arms. She offered the bottle, and Rose latched on eagerly. Within moments, the only sound in the room was the infant's contented gulps. Aurora closed her eyes briefly, uttering a silent thank you. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time that night. Sebastian felt a lump in his throat as he witnessed the baby feeding, and Aurora's palpable relief. He realized he'd been clutching his hands together and forced himself to relax. After a minute, he quietly asked, "Is she okay now?" Aurora glanced up, eyes shining with gratitude. "Yes, better than okay." She looked down at Rose, who was sucking earnestly, little fingers resting against Aurora's hand. She was so hungry. "I was so scared she'd have to wait until morning." "You're doing great," Sebastian said softly. "She's lucky to have you." The words came out before he could think, but he meant them sincerely. He had enough experience to know that not all parents showed this level of dedication and sacrifice. Aurora flushed at the compliment, a mix of pride and shame flickering in her eyes. I don't feel like I'm doing great," she murmured. "Tonight, I felt like I was failing her." Sebastian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Asking for help when you need it isn't failing. In fact, it's incredibly brave." His voice was earnest. "You put your daughter first. That's what good mothers do." Aurora met his gaze then. In the warm lamplight, Sebastian's eyes were a gentle hazel, full of understanding. She felt a connection in that moment, a sense that this man truly saw her struggle without judgment. Rose finished her bottle with a satisfied sigh. Aurora lifted the baby to her shoulder and gently patted her back to burp her. A soft belch and a gurgle later, Rose's cries had turned to the sweet, drowsy murmurs of a content baby. Within minutes, the infant was snuggling into her mother's neck, already drifting back to sleep now that her belly was full. Aurora stood carefully. "I'll just put her down in the crib. I'll be right back." "Of course," Sebastian replied quietly, rising from the couch. "Take your time." He watched as Aurora carried the now sleeping Rose to the bedroom nook just off the living area. Aurora's figure was silhouetted in the doorway for a moment as she gently laid her baby down and pulled a warm quilt over her. Humming a faint lullaby, Aurora brushed her fingers through the wispy curls on Rose's head until the child settled completely. The tenderness of the scene made Sebastian's chest tighten. A memory of his own mother doing the same for him flickered in his mind, a memory he hadn't revisited in years. Aurora returned, tiptoeing back into the living room and pulling the door half closed behind her to keep the baby's room quiet. She gave Sebastian an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I just wanted to make sure she's fully asleep." "You don't have to apologize for caring for your baby," Sebastian said kindly. I understand. Aurora gestured for him to sit again, and she took the other end of the small couch, tucking one leg beneath her. Now that the immediate crisis was handled, an awkwardness crept in. She suddenly became acutely aware of the man sitting in her living room, a stranger just an hour ago, yet now forever imprinted in her mind as the person who came through when she had nowhere else to turn. "I still can't believe you're here," she said softly, breaking the silence. Her eyes drifted to the empty bottle on the table and the precious cans of formula. "I don't know how to thank you enough. You saved us tonight." Sebastian shook his head. "I didn't do anything special. Anyone with a heart would have done the same." A wry smile touched Aurora's lips. "I'm not sure many people would drive out in the middle of the night for a stranger, Mr. She realized she didn't even know his last name. "Just Sebastian," he quickly supplied. "Let's keep it on a first-name basis." He offered that same friendly smile that put her at ease. "And for what it's worth, I think you would have done the same if the roles were reversed." Aurora nodded slowly. She liked that he didn't throw his last name or any titles around. He felt down to earth. "Maybe," she admitted. "I try to help when I can, but lately I haven't had much to give." Sebastian glanced at the modest home around them. He could see the signs of struggle, thrift store furniture, a few patches. On the Afghan draped over the chair, the faint circles under Aurora's eyes. Yet there were also signs of love, a framed photo of a smiling older woman, likely Aurora's mother, on the mantel, a colourful mobile hanging above Rose's crib, visible through the cracked door, a stack of baby books on the side table. This was a home where someone was trying very hard to make the best of little. "Sometimes, letting someone else help is the hardest thing," he said gently. He knew that all too well from his own past. "I'm really glad you did." Aurora exhaled, a hint of a laugh escaping. "Honestly, I almost didn't. When you first replied, I was mortified. I never ask anyone for help. It's just—" She paused, debating how much to say, but something about Sebastian's genuine interest encouraged her to continue. "I've always handled things on my own. When Rose's father left us, I decided I would do whatever it took to raise her without depending on anyone. My mom raised me that way, and I thought I could do the same. But tonight I just—" Her voice caught. "I had no other choice. I was so scared for my little girl." Sebastian's hands tightened into fists briefly at the mention of the father who had abandoned them. He kept his voice calm, though. "I can't imagine how hard that's been for you. You're strong, Aurora. Stronger than you know." She gave him a grateful look, wiping a stray tear that had escaped. The intensity of the last hour was finally ebbing, leaving her drained but also strangely at peace. Here she was, sitting next to a compassionate stranger who felt like a friend already. The warmth and safety she felt in his presence surprised her. She realized she hadn't even offered him that warm drink yet. "I'm sorry, I promised you something warm. I have tea, or hot cocoa, perhaps. I might even have coffee, though I don't usually brew it this late." "Tea would be great," Sebastian replied, smiling. In truth, he didn't care about the drink, but he sensed she needed to do this, to reclaim a bit of dignity by hosting him properly even in her hardship. Aurora hopped up and filled the kettle again, her movements light with relief now rather than frantic. As she prepared 2 mugs with tea bags, she glanced over her shoulder. "So, Sebastian, you live nearby? I wasn't sure if you were just passing through or—" "I have a place just outside town," he replied. He chose his words carefully, not wanting to get into specifics of his estate or wealth tonight. This moment wasn't about him. "I came out here to get away from the city for a while. Not too far from Oak Lane, actually. Sage Hollow is a beautiful town." Aurora smiled as she poured the steaming water. "It is. I've lived here all my life. It's small, but it has its charm. Though in winter it gets pretty quiet." He accepted the mug of tea she handed him. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Aurora felt a small jolt at the gentle contact. She returned to the couch with her own mug. Sebastian blew on the tea, then asked softly, "How long have you been on your own with Rose?" Aurora wrapped her hands around her mug for warmth. "Since the beginning," she said, looking down at the amber liquid. There was no bitterness in her tone, just a matter-of-fact acceptance. Her father left when I was 3 months pregnant. He wasn't ready to be a parent. I suppose I wasn't either, but I didn't have a choice. Once I knew she was coming, I was all in. Sebastian's chest tightened with empathy and a flicker of anger at the man who'd abandoned them. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "That must have been very hard." Aurora shrugged lightly, eyes distant. "It was. Still is some days. But I had my mom at least, for part of the time. She was my rock." Aurora's voice softened fondly. "She passed away shortly after Rose was born. Got to hold her granddaughter once. Then she was gone." A tear rolled down Aurora's cheek, but she wiped it quickly, not wanting to spiral into grief tonight. Sebastian felt a pang in his own heart. He knew too well the pain of losing a parent. "I'm sure she was incredibly proud of you," he said, recalling the framed photo he'd seen. "And she'd be proud of how you're raising your daughter." Aurora swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I hope so." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea. Sebastian checked his watch and realized it was nearly 5 in the morning. "It's very late," he said reluctantly. "I should let you get some rest before Rose wakes up again." Aurora nodded, though part of her didn't want him to leave. This connection felt too important to end so soon. "Of course. You must be tired too." They stood, and Sebastian handed her his mug. "Thank you for the tea, and for trusting me enough to let me help." Aurora set the mugs on the coffee table. "I should be the one thanking you. I don't know what would have happened if—" She trailed off, not wanting to imagine it. Sebastian reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Would it be all right if I checked in tomorrow, just to make sure you and Rose are doing okay?" Aurora felt a flutter in her chest at the idea that he wanted to stay in contact. "Yes, I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers, both aware of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. As they moved to the door, Sebastian paused. "Aurora, please don't hesitate to text if you need anything else. Anything at all." She nodded, touched by his sincerity. "I won't." "Thank you again, Sebastian." He stepped onto the porch, the pre-dawn air crisp around them. Aurora wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. Without thinking, Sebastian slipped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You'll catch cold," he said, when she began to protest. Aurora clutched the too large coat around her, inhaling the faint cedar scent that clung to it. "I'll get it back to you tomorrow," she promised. Sebastian smiled. No rush. He descended the steps, turning back once to wave before getting into his car. Aurora stood in the doorway until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Only then did she close the door, leaning against it with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. A wrong number had brought her exactly the right person at exactly the right time. If that wasn't a miracle, she didn't know what was. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Aurora's bedroom, warming her face as she slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented by how deeply she had slept. Rose's contented coos from the crib beside her bed brought the previous night rushing back. Had it all been a dream? The desperate text message sent to the wrong number, the kind stranger arriving at her door with formula in hand, the unexpected connection she'd felt sitting across from him on her worn couch. Aurora sat up and glanced toward the kitchen. There on the counter stood 2 large cans of formula, tangible proof that Sebastian had been real. His visit hadn't been a figment of her exhausted imagination or a wishful dream. She slipped out of bed and padded to the crib where Rose lay kicking her feet at the mobile overhead. The baby looked up at her mother's approach and broke into a toothless grin. Well, rested and content. "Good morning, sunshine," Aurora whispered, lifting Rose into her arms. "Someone's feeling much better today, aren't you?" Rose gurgled happily, grabbing at her mother's hair. The desperation of the previous night seemed far away now as Aurora carried her daughter to the changing table. As she went through their morning routine, fresh diaper, warm clothes, gentle kisses on pudgy cheeks, Aurora marveled at how quickly life could change. Last night she had hit rock bottom, crying alongside her hungry child with nowhere to turn. Now, just hours later, She felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just because of the formula that would feed Rose for weeks, but because a complete stranger had shown her such kindness without expecting anything in return. Aurora prepared a bottle, her movements unhurried now that there was no shortage. As Rose drank eagerly, Aurora's mind drifted to Sebastian. In her memory, his face remained gentle and kind, his voice warm with genuine concern. She had met plenty of men since Rose's father left: customers at the diner who flirted, neighbors who offered half-hearted help, old high school acquaintances who reached out only to disappear when they realized her life now included a baby. None had looked at her the way Sebastian had, with respect untainted by pity. When Rose finished her bottle, Aurora placed her in the bouncer and reached for her phone on the kitchen counter. She hesitated, wondering if Sebastian would actually text as promised. Part of her expected that in the light of day he would move on. There, brief connection forgotten as he returned to his normal life. The screen lit up with a message notification. Aurora's heart jumped as she read, "One, good morning. How are you and Rose doing today?" She smiled, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. Sebastian had remembered. He had thought of them. With Rose cooing contentedly nearby, and the morning sun filling her small kitchen, Aurora felt the weight on her shoulders lighten just a little. Perhaps kindness wasn't as rare as she'd come to believe. Perhaps there were still good people in the world. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had felt in those dark hours before dawn. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Aurora allowed herself to feel not just grateful, but hopeful. Sebastian sat at the breakfast table in his estate's sunlit morning room, coffee untouched before him. He had slept only a few hours, yet felt more energized than he had in months. His mind kept returning to the small house on Oak Lane, to the young mother who had accidentally reached out to him, to the baby girl with the name that echoed his past. The household staff moved quietly around him, refreshing his coffee, offering breakfast he barely noticed. His phone lay beside his plate, the message to Aurora already sent. He found himself checking it every few minutes, wondering if she would respond. Last night had affected him deeply. In his rise to success, Sebastian had grown accustomed to solving problems with money: donations to charities, funds for disaster relief, investments in promising startups. All worthy causes, all kept at a comfortable distance. But last night had been different. He had looked into the eyes of someone in need, heard a baby's hungry cries, witnessed firsthand the relief on Aurora's face when Rose finally had food. It had been immediate, personal, real. His phone chimed with a reply. Sebastian quickly picked it up, a smile forming as he read Aurora's message. "Good morning, Sebastian. We're doing well. Rose had a good night and is much happier now, as am one. Thank you again, truly." He typed back immediately. "I'm very glad to hear that. I was thinking of you both. Hope you got some rest." Sebastian set the phone down, struck by the realization that he genuinely cared about this woman and her child, whom he'd known for less than 12 hours. There was something about Aurora, her quiet dignity, her fierce love for her daughter, the way she had maintained grace even in her darkest moment, and little Rose, innocent and trusting, bearing his mother's name like a sign he couldn't ignore. When was the last time he had felt this connected to anyone? His days were filled with business associates who wanted his influence, women who were attracted to his wealth, acquaintances who valued what he could provide rather than who he was. The irony wasn't lost on him. A billionaire surrounded by people yet profoundly alone. Last night, in a humble home on Oak Lane, he had felt more seen and more genuine than in all the boardrooms and charity galas of the past year. Sebastian stood and walked to the wall of windows overlooking his manicured gardens. The estate suddenly felt excessively large, unnecessarily grand. He thought of Aurora's modest home, small but filled with love. How she had offered him tea and conversation, despite having so little to give. His phone chimed again. Aurora had sent a photo of Rose, freshly awake and smiling a little, bundled in her baby blanket. Below the photo, "Someone wants to say thank you for last night." Sebastian felt his heart warm at the sight. He replied, She's precious. That smile made my day. Decision made, he grabbed his coat. He would go into town, perhaps visit the diner where Aurora had mentioned she worked. Not to intrude, but to check on them, to see if there was anything else they needed. For the first time in years, Sebastian felt something stirring within him, a sense of purpose beyond quarterly reports and stock prices. He wasn't quite sure what it meant yet, but he knew he couldn't simply walk away from Aurora and Rose. The next few days unfolded with a gentle rhythm, punctuated by the soft chimes of incoming messages on Aurora's phone. What began as Sebastian's morning check-ins evolved into an ongoing conversation that flowed throughout their days, a digital connection that bridged the gap between his estate and her small cottage. "Good morning. Did Rose sleep well?" Sebastian's text would arrive just after dawn, as if he knew exactly when Aurora would be up for the baby's first feeding. Aurora found herself smiling at her phone screen as she typed her reply with one hand, the other cradling Rose. She slept for a 5-hour stretch. "I feel like I won the lottery." Their exchanges carried through the morning as Aurora prepared for work, Sebastian's messages blending seamlessly into her routine. She would share small victories. "And Rose grabbed her toes today," and our everyday frustrations, and spilled coffee all over my only clean work shirt. "Monday is really showing up today," Sebastian responded with warmth and humor, sending her jokes to brighten difficult days or thoughtful questions that showed he truly listened. "What was your favorite book as a kid?" he asked one afternoon, sparking a long discussion about childhood reading habits that carried them through an entire day. By the end of the first week, Aurora realized she was sharing more with Sebastian than she had with anyone since her mother died. Something about texting made it easier to open up, the slight remove of not being face to face, perhaps, or the way she could carefully choose her words. "And sometimes I worry I'm not enough for Rose," she admitted late one evening after a particularly challenging day when Rose had been fussy and Aurora's shift at the diner had been exhausting. Her father walked away so easily. What if she grows up feeling like half of her is missing? Sebastian's response came quickly. "Any man who walked away from you two made the biggest mistake of his life. Rose has everything she needs in you: love, strength, kindness. Those aren't half measures, Aurora. They're everything." His words brought tears to her eyes, a healing balm to wounds she'd carried silently. Aurora found herself staring at that message long after Rose had fallen asleep, rereading it until she could almost hear Sebastian saying the words aloud. Their digital conversation became a lifeline for both of them. Sebastian began sending photos of his morning walks, the sunrise over the hills outside town, a family of deer he spotted near his property. Aurora responded with snapshots of Rose's milestone moments. Her first attempt at solid food, mostly ending up on her chin, her concentrated expression as she learned to roll over. "She looks so serious." Sebastian commented on a photo of Rose's furrowed brow as she examined a new toy. "And a future scientist analyzing her data." Aurora laughed aloud at his observation. "Maybe so, though at the moment her research seems focused on what happens if I put everything in my mouth." Through these exchanges, the texture of their days became intertwined. Sebastian learned Aurora's schedule when she worked at the diner, when Rose typically napped, which evenings were laundry nights at the laundromat down the street. Aurora gleaned details about Sebastian's life too, his early morning runs, his work calls that sometimes stretched past midnight, his preference for classical music while he reviewed documents. One night, after Rose was asleep, Aurora sent a message that surprised even herself with its candidness. "I never expected that a wrong number would lead to whatever this is. I'm grateful for it, though. Talking to you has become one of the best parts of my day." The three dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as Sebastian composed his reply. "Finally, I feel the same way. Meeting you and Rose has been the most unexpected gift. I was going through the motions before. Now I look forward to each day." There was an intimacy in these admissions, a vulnerability neither had planned. Yet, it felt natural, a gradual unfolding of connection through hundreds of small messages each one a thread weaving them closer together. By the end of 2 weeks, they had established inside jokes and shared references. Sebastian knew exactly which emoji would make Aurora laugh, and Aurora could tell Sebastian's mood from the punctuation in his texts. When she sent "Can't talk now, Rose is having a meltdown and I'm running late for work," he understood precisely what she needed. Not advice, but a simple, "You've got this. Text me later when things calm down." The digital conversations created a foundation, a getting to know you that happened in reverse. Intimacy first, established through words, exchanged in vulnerable moments, then building outward into the physical world where their paths began to cross with increasing frequency. The bell above the door of the Sage Hollow diner jingled on Tuesday morning, drawing Aurora's attention from the coffee pot she was refilling. She looked up to see Sebastian entering, his tall figure immediately noticeable, among the usual breakfast crowd of retirees and local workers. Her heart gave a little jump as their eyes met across the room, his face brightening with a smile. "Well now, who's that handsome fellow?" whispered Doris, an elderly regular seated at the counter. Her eyes twinkled with the delight of potential gossip. "He's been in here every day this week, and he only ever sits in your section." Aurora felt warmth rush to her cheeks. "Just a friend," she murmured,